There are things out there we still don't understand. They're in the woods, the back roads, lurking in the shadows, the parks, or even in our homes. Before you tonight are 5 reports that may shed light on the unknown. I've been a landscape photographer for about 12 years now, and I've spent more nights alone in the wild than I can count. I've camped in spots most people would consider remote, even desolate. Places where you don't see another person for days at a time, where the silence is so complete it can be overbearing. I'm comfortable with the loneliness. I prefer it, actually, or at least I used to. What happened in the Santa Lucia Mountains last October radically changed all that. I'm not talking about being startled by animals or getting lost on a trail. I'm talking about the kind of experience that makes you wonder whether you're truly alone in a place you thought was empty. It starts to make you understand why certain locations have gathered centuries of lore, all describing the same impossible thing. I'd planned the trip for months. The Santa Lucias run along California's central coast, stretching from Monterey down through Big Sur. It's breathtaking country, especially in autumn when the fog rolls in off the coast in the late afternoon and shifts the ridgelines into something almost otherworldly. I'd gotten permits to camp near Cone Peak, one of the highest points in the range, with sweeping vistas of both the Pacific Ocean and the inland valleys. The hike in took most of the day. It was mid-October and the weather was perfect. Clear skies, temperatures in the low 70s, and just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. I reached my campsite around 4 in the afternoon and spent the next hour setting up my gear and scouting locations for the sunset shots I'd come for. The view from up there was everything I'd hoped it would be. To the west, the ocean stretched out to the horizon, the water catching the afternoon light and turning it into a sheet of hammered silver. To the east, the mountains rolled away in layers of blue and purple, each ridge more faint than the last until they dissolved into haze. I brought my best camera equipment, my Canon 5D Mark IV, several lenses, a sturdy tripod, and filters for long exposures. I was planning to shoot the golden hour, that magical window just before sunset when the light turns everything soft and warm. Then I'd stay up for the stars. The Santa Lucias are far enough from cities that the night sky there is spectacular, and I was hoping to get some good shots of the Milky Way over the ridgeline. As the sun started to go down, I positioned myself on a rock spur that gave me an unobstructed view to the west. The light was perfect. I shot frame after frame as the sky transitioned through shades of orange and pink and deep red. I was completely absorbed in the work, in the technical decisions about exposure and composition, and the simple pleasure of watching the day end in such a beautiful place. Then I got the sensation of being watched. The back of my neck started itching to the point I was actually scratching it. The hairs all stood up. I looked around, scouring the area near my camp. There was nothing except rocks and scrub in the gathering twilight. I went back to my camera, telling myself it was the isolation getting to me, but the feeling didn't go away. It only got stronger. I found myself glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, unable to shake the thought that something was out there, just beyond my sight. Finally, I stopped pretending to work and turned around completely, examining the cliffs to the east. The sun was behind me now, casting long shadows across the mountains. The fog was starting to roll in, just wisps of it at first, curling around the peaks and settling into the valleys. And that's when I saw it. On a ridge maybe 200 yards away, silhouetted against the darkening sky, stood a figure. It was tall, at least 8 or 9 feet, maybe more. It was hard to judge in that light, but it towered over the surrounding rocks. The figure was completely black, a featureless silhouette, but I could make out what looked like a wide-brimmed hat, and some kind of flowing cloak or cape that moved slightly in the wind. It was standing perfectly still, facing in my direction. I thought it had to be another hiker at first, but then realized that didn't make sense. The figure was too tall, and no one hikes in a cape and hat like that. Plus, I hadn't seen any other vehicles at the trailhead, and this wasn't exactly a popular camping spot. I raised my hand and waved, then called out a greeting. My voice sounded thin and small in the vast space. The figure didn't move, didn't wave back. It just stood there, motionless and watching. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Something about this was off. I grabbed my camera and zoomed in, trying to get a better look. Now I could see the figure more clearly. The hat was definitely there, wide-brimmed and dark. The cape or cloak hung down to what I assumed were its feet, though I couldn't see them. But what disturbed me the most was the complete absence of features. Where there should have been a face, there was only darkness. I took several photos, my hands trembling a bit. Then I lowered the camera and looked at the ridge with my naked eye. The figure was still there, and it hadn't even moved. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Do you need help?" No response. It didn't even react to my voice. I don't know how long I stood there. Part of me wanted to walk over, to see whatever this was and prove to myself that it was just a person. But something inside of me absolutely refused to take even one step in that direction. The fog was getting thicker now, rolling up from the ocean and settling over the ridges. For a moment, it hid the figure completely. When it cleared, maybe 10 seconds later, the ridge was empty. The figure was gone. I immediately swung my camera back up and searched the area. The ridge was exposed, no trees or large rocks to hide behind. I checked my camera's screen, pulling up the photos I'd just taken. The first few showed the ridge, the rocks, and sparse scrubs in full detail. But where the figure should have been, there was nothing. I scrolled through every shot I'd taken. The ridge was there, perfectly in focus, but the figure wasn't in any of them. It was like I'd taken pictures of empty air. I felt a knot in my stomach and just knew I had to get out of there. I packed up my gear as the last light faded from the sky. I told myself I was only moving to a better location for the star photography. But the truth was I didn't want to be out in the open anymore. I retreated to my tent and sat inside with my headlamp on, staring at those empty photos on my camera's screen, trying to understand how I could have seen something so clearly that left no trace on film. I tossed and turned that night. Something about what I'd seen didn't let me relax. Eventually, I gave up trying to sleep. Around 3 a.m, I saw it again. I went out to take a leak, and this time it was closer, maybe 100 yards away, on a rocky outcrop right below my campsite. The same silhouette against the stars with the same unnatural stillness. And even though I couldn't see a face, I knew it was looking directly at me. In a rush, I grabbed my camera. I raised it to my eye, framed the shot, and pressed the shutter. The flash went off, lighting up the outcrop in a brief burst of white. The figure was gone. I sat there for the rest of the night with my back against a rock, watching that ledge, my mind wrestling with what I'd seen. When the first light hit the mountains, I packed up and hiked back down to my car as fast as I could. I didn't look at the photos until I was in my vehicle with the doors locked. The last shot showed nothing. I haven't been back to the Santa Lucias. I've taken assignments in other mountain ranges and other locations. But I don't want to go back to those ridges, because the second time it came closer, and I don't know what would have happened if there'd have been a third time. This happened last summer when I was driving home from my girlfriend's place. She lives about 20 minutes outside of town, where there's lots of woods and old farms. The kind of roads where you barely see another car after 9 or 10 at night. It was around 11:30, and I was taking the back roads because it's faster than going through town. I know the route well. I've driven it hundreds of times. Miller Road is this narrow two-lane that cuts through a heavily wooded section, with old stone walls running along both sides from when the area used to be all farmland. I was maybe 5 miles from home when I saw something on the side of the road. It looked like a deer at first, the way it was crouched low near the trees. My headlights caught it and I saw the eye shine, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a deer. The thing was squatting at the edge of the woods, maybe 15 feet from the road. It turned its head toward my car, and that's when I got a good look. I only saw it for a few seconds as I passed, but that was enough. It was small, probably 3 or 4 feet tall, with this oddly large head that bulged at the top and tapered down, and the eyes were huge, way bigger than they should have been, glowing this bright orange color in my headlights. I couldn't see a nose or mouth, only smooth skin stretched around that oversized skull. The body was thin, almost emaciated, with limbs that looked too long for its size. I could see one of its hands gripping the ground, and the fingers were elongated. They reminded me of spider legs. The skin had this rough texture appearance and was a weird peachy tan color. I passed it in maybe 3 seconds. My brain was trying to piece together what I'd seen, and by the time I thought to hit the brakes, I was already 100 yards down the road. I stopped and looked in my rearview mirror, but the way behind me was dark. I sat there for a minute, trying to decide if I should go back. Every fiber in my body was screaming not to. Whatever that thing was, I didn't want to get closer to it. Instead, I put the car in drive and got out of there. When I got home, I went straight to my computer and tried to figure out what I'd seen. I searched for every animal I could think of that might match the description. Baby bear, fox with mange, deformed raccoon, anything. Nothing came close. I told my girlfriend about it the next day. She said it was probably someone's dog that got loose, or a kid playing a prank. I don't know. She could have been right. I convinced myself it was late and the shadows made things look weird. 3 nights later, I was driving home from her place taking the same route. I told myself I wasn't scared, that whatever I'd seen had to be long gone. But as I approached that stretch of Miller Road, I slowed down without even thinking about it. And there it was, not in the exact same spot, but close. Maybe 50 yards further down, on the opposite side of the street this time. It was standing upright next to a tree, and when my headlights hit it, it turned to look at me. Now I got a better look because I was going slower. Those oversized eyes locked onto my car glowing that same orange, and then it moved. It kind of skittered sideways into the tree line. I'm surprised it didn't trip over its long legs. Within 2 seconds, it was gone. I didn't stop. I pressed the gas and got the hell out of there, and I haven't driven down Miller Road at night since. When I go to my girlfriend's place now, I take the main road. It adds 10 minutes to the drive, but I don't care. She asked me once why I go the long way now. I told her the back road creeps me out at night. I didn't tell her about seeing it twice, and I don't think I will. I've been exploring abandoned buildings for about 6 years now. Started in high school with old hospitals, shuttered malls, the usual. These days I'm more selective. I look for places with history and character, preferably if they have some kind of story to tell. The Foundry on Hammond Street had been on my list for 2 years before I finally got inside. It's a massive brick building on the east side of Gary, Indiana, built in 1903. and abandoned since the late 70s. 4 stories of casting floors, offices, and storage areas, plus a basement level that used to house the furnaces. The whole place covers maybe 3 acres, surrounded by a rusted chain link fence that's been cut open in a dozen places by scrappers over the years. I'd driven past it maybe 20 times, taking photos of the exterior and waiting for the right weather. You want overcast days for this kind of work. The light is softer and more even, makes for better photography, and it's easier to get around inside where the windows are blown out. I went in on a Tuesday in late October. Cold but not freezing. The sky was like brushed aluminum. I parked 3 blocks away behind an abandoned grocery store, packed my gear, and walked to the southern fence where I'd spotted the easiest way to get in. The fence peeled back like it wanted me inside. The first floor was what you'd expect. Concrete floors buckled and stained. Walls tagged with spray paint and broken glass everywhere. Most of the equipment had been stripped decades ago, leaving only the heaviest pieces. Huge steel tables bolted to the floor, overhead crane rails running the length of the building, and a few rusted cabinets lying on their sides. Pigeons scattered as I moved through, their wings echoing off the high ceilings. I spent about an hour on the main floor, shooting some great pictures. Light falling through broken windows, nature reclaiming the corners where water damage had let moss and small plants sprout, the beautiful decay of industrial architecture. The stairwell to the second floor was intact but sketchy. I tested each step and kept my weight near the wall where the supports were strongest. The air got colder as I climbed and more damp. I could smell mold and standing water, rust and old oil, and sometimes underneath it all, something organic and sour that I couldn't place. The second floor was darker, fewer windows and more interior walls still standing. This had been the admin level, offices, break rooms, and storage. I found old filing cabinets spilling yellowed paperwork across the floor, their contents long since ruined by water and time. A break room still had a table and chairs, and someone had arranged the chairs in a circle, all facing inward. Probably just other explorers messing around, but it gave me a weird feeling anyway. My ears pricked up when I heard it. A grating sound, metal on concrete, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. I stopped moving and listened. Scrappers aren't unheard of in places like this. Guys hauling out copper wire and brass fixtures to sell. Usually they work during the day and make a lot of noise, but this was quieter. It would grate for 5 or 6 seconds, stop, then start again. I called out, told whoever it was that I was just taking photos, and I wasn't there to cause any trouble. The grating stopped. I waited maybe 2 minutes but heard nothing else. Figured it was probably someone who didn't want to be seen any more than I did. I made a mental note of the direction, somewhere toward the north end of the building, and started heading the opposite way. The eastern wing of the second floor was in worse shape. Part of the roof had collapsed, letting in the weather, and the floor was littered with debris and rot. I picked my way carefully through what looked like it had been a foreman's office, finding old calendars still hanging on the wall, frozen in 1977. It was there that something caught my attention. At first glance, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the broken rafters above. But shadows don't leave tracks. There, in the thick dust coating the floor, was a footprint. It was maybe 10 inches long and narrow, with 4 distinct toes that ended in what looked like claw marks. The heel was stretched, almost like a paw, but not exactly. There were more of them leading away from where I stood, heading toward a doorway that opened into darkness. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in abandoned buildings, altars made by cults, signs of people living rough in the old buildings. once I even found a room full of mannequins all facing the same direction, which still gives me nightmares. Plenty of times there are rats and raccoons, but I've never seen a big animal like the print suggested. I pulled out my phone to take a picture of the print, and that's when I noticed my signal was gone. That happens sometimes in these big concrete buildings, but my phone had been fine on the first floor. The grinding started again, coming from that dark doorway where the tracks led. I've got a rule about urban exploration. Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, you leave. Doesn't matter if you've only been inside for 10 minutes, or if you drove 3 hours to get there. Your instincts kept your ancestors alive, and they'll keep you alive too. I started backing toward the stairwell, keeping my eyes on that doorway. Something moved in the darkness. I vaguely saw a tall, thin outline, standing just beyond where the light reached, and I could hear breathing. Then I heard it from behind me as well. That tipped the scales too far into the weird, and I ran. Every rule about being careful and testing floors was thrown out the window. I moved, slamming through that stairwell and taking the steps 3 at a time. I could hear sounds behind me, but I didn't have time to look back. I burst out the first floor exit and didn't stop until I was back in my car, fumbling my keys, and shaking so bad I could barely get the door open. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, trying to calm down. Old buildings can make strange sounds. Shadows play tricks. But I couldn't understand the tracks, and I couldn't explain what happened when I reviewed my photos later that night. In 3 of them, shots I'd taken on the second floor before I found the prints. There's something in the background. Some might say I'm seeing things because you can barely make out an outline, but it's tall and thin, and standing in doorways I thought were empty. In one photo, you can almost make out the shape of long arms and a head that seems too small for its body. I still go exploring. Nothing will ever stop that. But I check more carefully now. If I hear something, I go and check it out, or leave right away if it feels too dangerous. I've tried to enhance the pictures in Photoshop, but it's too dark and they come out even worse. Maybe it's for the best. Sometimes the unknown is scary, and sometimes not knowing is better than seeing how bad it could have been. I'm a dog walker, not professionally or anything, but it's something I do for extra cash. I've got about 5 regular clients in my neighborhood, and one of them is this older guy who owns a German Shepherd named Duke. Duke's a good boy, but he's got energy for days, so the man pays me to take him out for a long walk every night around 9. The path I usually take goes through Riverside Park. It's a decent-sized park, maybe 15 acres, with a playground, some baseball fields, and a walking trail that loops around a small pond. During the day, it's full of families and joggers, but at night, it's pretty much empty. Only me, Duke, and the streetlights along the path. I had been walking Duke through there for almost 4 months without incident. Never had any problems or felt unsafe. It's a nice neighborhood. That night was a Tuesday in late September. Cold, but not freezing. And the park was completely empty like usual. Duke and I were about halfway around the pond when he stopped and went stiff. His ears went up and he stared at the playground about 50 yards from the path. I glanced over but didn't see anything at first. When I told him to come on, he wouldn't move. He was laser focused on something out there. I then followed where he was looking, and finally I saw them as well. 2 kids were standing near the swings, a boy and a girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old. The boy was wearing a hoodie, and the girl had on a jacket that looked too thin for the weather. They weren't moving, but were standing there side by side, facing our direction. Where were their parents, I thought to myself. It was after 9 on a Tuesday night. No one should let their kids out that late by themselves. Duke started growling. The hair on his back stood up, and he pulled against the leash, trying to back away. I called out to the kids, asked if they were okay and if they needed help. They acted like I hadn't said anything. Then they started walking toward us. There was something wrong about the way they walked. They reminded me of soldiers, marching with their legs swinging in time with each other, and their arms glued to their sides. Duke was pulling hard now, whining and trying to get back to the path. I started backing up, but kept my eyes on the kids and called out again, asking if they were lost. The girl then spoke. Her voice was flat, emotionless. She said they needed help, that their mom was supposed to pick them up, but she hadn't come. She asked if I could give them a ride. I told them I didn't have my car, that I was just walking my dog, but I could call someone for them. I then pulled out my phone. That's when the boy spoke in the same flat tone. He said they didn't want me to call anyone. They just wanted me to help them. They were maybe 20 feet away now, close enough that I could see them clearly under the park lights. And that's when I noticed their eyes. They were completely black, like someone had filled the sockets in with ink. The girl said they were cold, that they needed to come with me. Her voice didn't change, didn't show any emotion. It felt like she was giving me an order. Duke was going crazy now, barking and snarling, pulling so hard I almost lost my grip on the leash. I had never seen him act like that toward anyone, let alone kids. I was kind of getting uneasy now and started backing away faster. That's when they changed tactics. The boy said they just wanted to pet my dog because they love dogs. He asked if they could come closer. I said no because inside I knew this wasn't right. They stopped walking and stood there, staring at me with those black eyes. The girl tilted her head to the side and gave this sickly sweet smile before she told me I was being rude. That flipped a switch and I turned and ran. Duke didn't need to be told twice. We sprinted back down the path toward the park entrance, and I didn't look back until we were in the parking lot under the bright lights. By then, the playground was empty. The kids were gone. I got Duke back to his house and told his owner what happened. Left out the part about the eyes, though. Simply said some kids in the park had made me uncomfortable. He asked if I wanted to call the cops, but I said no. I couldn't think of what I'd tell them. I still walked Duke. It took a while, but I went back to the park in the spring. I haven't seen the kids since that one night. I'm still not sure what to make about what happened. My name is Marcus, and until 6 months ago, I lived with my mom and uncle on the edge of the Navajo Reservation in northern Arizona. My Uncle Ray was my mom's older brother, a quiet guy who worked construction and kept to himself. He was the kind of person who'd give you the shirt off his back, but wouldn't say more than 10 words at dinner. It started in late June. Uncle Ray had been coming home later and later from work, sometimes not until 9 or 10 at night. When Mom asked him about it, he'd simply shrug and mumble something about the crew being behind schedule. Fair enough, but he looked exhausted. Not just tired, but hollowed out, like something was draining him from the inside. Then he stopped eating with us. Mom would set a plate for him and he'd take it to his room. We'd hear him in there at night, moving around, talking to himself in this low murmur we couldn't quite make out. One time I pressed my ear to his door and heard him repeating that he couldn't do something over and over again. When I asked him the next morning if he was okay, he looked right through me like I wasn't even there. The first time I knew something was really wrong was the night I saw him in 2 places at once. I woke up around 2 a.m. to take a piss. The hallway light was on, and I could see Uncle Ray's bedroom door was open. He was standing in the doorway with his back to me, facing into the dark room. I was about to say something when I heard the back door open and close downstairs. Heavy footsteps came up. Uncle Ray walked past me in the hallway, reeking of cigarette smoke and sweat, and went to his bedroom, where he was already standing. I stood there frozen as the one in the doorway slowly turned around. In the dim light, I couldn't make out his face clearly, but I could tell he smiled at me. Then the door closed. I spent the rest of the night in my room with a chair under the doorknob, trying to convince myself I'd been sleepwalking. But the next morning, there were muddy footprints on the stairs, 2 sets, both the same boot size. I told Mom. She brushed it off, said I must have had a nightmare, but I could see the worry in her eyes. She'd noticed things too. How Uncle Ray never seemed to blink anymore, and he'd started wearing long sleeves even in the Arizona heat. How sometimes when he talked to him, there'd be this delay before he responded, like he was remembering how to speak. A few days later, my friend Jordan came by to pick me up. We were heading out when he stopped and looked at the living room window. He asked why my uncle was staring at us like that. I turned to see Uncle Ray standing in the window, motionless, and watching us with his head tilted in a strange way. I gave a little wave. He looked like a mannequin. Not a muscle moved, not even a blink. I muttered something about him being weird lately and we left. When I got home that night, Mom told me Uncle Ray had called in sick to work. He'd gone to a doctor's appointment and been gone most of the day. I said that would explain why he was acting funny when Jordan and I had seen him in the window about noon. Mom went pale. She told me that was impossible. Ray had left for his appointment at 11 and didn't get back until 4. We went to his room. He was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Mom shook him awake and asked where he'd been all day. He looked confused, said he'd been at the clinic, and showed us the appointment card to prove it. The timestamp said 11:47 a.m. Someone, or something, had been in our house, standing in that window, wearing his face. Mom called her cousin Thomas that night. He lives on the res and knows all the old stories. She spoke to him in Navajo, and I heard him shouting on the other end, telling her to get out of the house. She hung up and locked herself in her room. I should have left then. We all should have. The next night I heard scratching on my window. I stay on the 2nd floor. I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the ceiling and my headphones turned up until sunrise. Uncle Ray didn't come out of his room that day, or the next. Mom left food by his door, but it never got touched. On the 3rd day, she used her spare key and opened his door. The room was empty. The window was open, and scratched deep into the drywall were dozens of tally marks, like he'd been counting something. That was 4 days ago. We're staying at Tom's place now. Mom filed a missing person report, but the police aren't taking it seriously. They think Uncle Ray just took off, had some kind of breakdown, or was on drugs. Yesterday, our neighbor stopped by to see how we're doing. We had told her we were helping my mom's cousin with some stuff. She wanted to know if Uncle Ray was with us, because she'd seen him outside our house the night before, standing on the lawn around 3 a.m. staring up at the windows. She was wondering if she should be concerned. Tom says we can't go back to the house, that whatever took an interest in Uncle Ray, it's not done. He says that once they choose you, they study you, learn you, and then become you. He won't say the name. He says speaking it draws attention, but he's burned white ash every night since we arrived, and keeps ash across every threshold. I don't know what happened to my real uncle. I don't know if he's still alive somewhere, or if what we were living with these past months was already not him.
You have been watching Neon Noir.
A Radeon production brought to you by Spoopy Cola.